What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and what a way to kick off the Aaron Glenn regime. A win in the first week of preseason, and Aaron Glenn even talked about how important it is, even though it's preseason, to get these wins. They're hard to come across no matter what. So to see us just completely steamroll the Packers, a team that's been a perennial playoff team, mostly due to not only having star players, but of course the depth that they're able to build as well. So this is a quality win, in my opinion. I don't care who tries to slice it up and, you know, throw salt on what we've been able to accomplish here, if you will. But it's a first step for Aaron Glenn when it comes to teaching this team and instilling the win by any means necessary kind of mentality, right? And so for this video, I want to talk, of course, about the game as a large and a lot of the people that stood out, even with all of the players. And there's a long list of names that have done really good things for us this Saturday. You can still pick out a couple of players with, you know, a ton of opportunities as well to hopefully ball out in the second or third preseason game that couldn't necessarily get things done here. And also some things that I just found intriguing from like a depth chart standpoint with how some of these guys were playing and different things of that nature. But we have to kick things off with, of course, our coaching staff. Aaron Glenn, Tanner Engstrand, Steve Wilks. I think these guys did a phenomenal job. And we can't talk about them without first mentioning a comment that I've seen from LaFleur from his post-game press conference, or at least in the following days since. But he mentioned, of course, a lot of accountability that needed to go on. There were all the drops, there were the holding calls, and then, of course, just the lack of execution. But I found it interesting that he did highlight that the Packers did very little game planning for the Jets leading up to this, which is in complete juxtaposition of what we saw from Aaron Glenn, who highlighted during his press conference that week that we are giving this a game atmosphere feel. We're going through our walkthroughs, we're executing on what we think the Packers are going to do and bringing that out onto the field. And then ultimately just having the physicality on both sides of the ball. I think when you look at Tanner Engstrand specifically, the concepts he was able to put together in the passing game, from the mix of screenplays and calling those at the right time to even looking at the end of the game scenario where we didn't try to get cutesy with anything. We were running the ball to run out time. And we were still able to go out there and pick up chunk plays and stuff, even huge plays that ended up getting called back from penalties that we'll talk about. But for a team that leading up into this Packers game, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, that looked like it was having a ton of struggles, you would have thought it was anything but with the performance. And then with Steve Wilks and Aaron Glenn in that combination, I think we got to see a ton of standout players on that side of the ball. But not only that, we were just overly aggressive and physical, and it seemed like the Packers were ill prepared to handle that kind of game, and that's what you love to see. This gave me huge flashbacks to the Rex Ryan days where the offense just kind of felt like whoever was getting targeted on that particular play knew that hits were coming, knew that it was going to be a struggle to either get open or catch and secure the ball, and it just ended up being a long day from start to finish for the Packers. So great job just seeing that these guys were not only prepared, we executed for the most part, and we were the team that was able to dictate the game from start to finish. I don't think we ever lost a lead once we got that opening series touchdown, which, by the way, very rare occurrence for us over the course of really the last decade and a half for the Jets. So let's talk about some of the players here, right? Justin Fields, this is going to be the name that everybody was going to be drawn to and cared about the most. Only got to see him for the one series, but it did end in that touchdown 13-yard scamper for him. And I think I've seen some stats out there like it's the longest touchdown since Geno Smith in terms of a rushing score by a quarterback, and also the first one I think since Geno Smith as well, which I think we're talking about like 2014-ish. So insane. You're going to see Justin Fields break so many rushing records and statistics for the Jets, and it's already happening during this preseason with many more to come. But I thought Justin Fields looked comfortable. he allowed the defense to show him where he was going to go with the ball. And for as much as he was utilizing his legs this game, I do think it came in the manner that this coaching staff and everybody else would have wanted to see when you're viewing it from the standpoint of him as a passer, and that he wasn't just looking to take off if pressure was coming. He was extending plays, and if things weren't there after a second or two, he was rushing off to try to pick up a first down, pick up a touchdown, just get a couple positive yards, and like we heard Aaron Glenn talk about, live to fight that next play, just reduce the negativity. Justin Fields did as much to make anybody comfortable about his performance within this offense as you could reasonably expect based on how the defense was playing early, which was to limit any kind of explosive plays for us, which we know we're going to headhunt for this offseason. But he took what was there, and his playmakers were able to make things happen for him, which is exactly what the top tier guys are able to do. It's not always going to be days just throwing bombs left and right, but he was able to go out there and put some good stuff out there. I think you've seen a lot of the same call-outs from practices in this game too, though. There was an inaccurate out route to Garrett Wilson, for example, one that probably should have been made in terms of the catch in and of itself, but one where he could have placed it on him a little bit better too in a situation where he was being harried. But fantastic opening for him, and anything that results in a touchdown generally you have to be excited about. Now, to go down this list of quarterbacks, Adrian Martinez continues to impress, right? He was a preseason hero / darling last year, and he's picked up right where he left off last year after kind of juggling for that QB3 roster spot. Cooks has been the better quarterback in training camp practice going into the last week or two and got the nod over Adrian Martinez in this game, but Adrian Martinez looked like the better quarterback for this specific game. Looked like he was in control, looked like he was able to dictate when he was going to be able to make plays against that defense. And there was 3 or 4 kind of Hail Mary prayer balls that was out there I didn't necessarily love, like the big catch to Quentin Skinner, for example, but he gave his players a chance to go out there and make the plays, which is what you expect, and at least it happened with players that it makes sense for, right? Like throwing up a prayer ball to Jamal Pritchett, small, diminutive size, not necessarily a expected catching traffic type target. That would have concerned me compared to Quentin Skinner. Ball kind of floats up there, so double coverage ends up essentially being there, but was able to place it to generally where Quentin was only going to be able to make that play happen. So I love it. Also got to see him pick up, first downs and such with his legs too. He looks like the player up front most able to recreate what you get out of Justin Fields leading a team. So who knows if we even keep a QB3 one way or the other, right? But I think, as I've discussed with many of you guys, we would all love to see Cook and or Adrian Martinez both land on the practice squad and figure out how we can go about things from there. But moving into some of the weapons, Andrew Beck, pretty big day. And from my understanding, I'm pretty sure he got the nod. I couldn't watch too much with the kids being right there in my face and everything, but I feel like Andrew Beck got the starting nod over Jeremy Ruckert, who also on the unofficial depth chart is over Mason Taylor. But I talked about this with Boy Green when I caught up with him on one of our weekend shows, and I put out there that I think Andrew Beck could be someone that makes Jeremy Ruckert null and void and a potential cut candidate, and he did nothing to quell that particular theory of mine, where as a check down option for Justin Fields, he just went out there and made plays. A ton of catch in traffic. Not a ton of catch in traffic. A ton of catch after the run, with just picking up chunk games and really being able to gash the defense that wasn't disciplined in pursuit angles. But this is a guy that just does everything well historically. And it can't be understated that this is going to be a Darren Muji guy as his first official signing. And we'll see who ends up winning the job. But if you're looking at scores in terms of like PFF grades and stuff like that, if you're a stat sheet watcher, or even if you're just looking at the film, objectively speaking, Andrew Beck had Jeremy Ruckert beat in every facet, and he's going to bring more veteran experience. So overall, the needle's pointing up for him, and definitely a great way to step into potentially stealing that tight end 2 role, or whatever this hybrid-ish type role is going to be that him or Jeremy Ruckert fits into. And then we have to talk running backs. The best part of our roster on the offensive side of the ball, not including the offensive line. And everybody showed a key reason as to why they would just be a star within this offense. When you look at, well, Breece Hall kind of had a so-so day overall, but when you look at some of the other names we're going to mention here, Donovan Edwards is going to be at the forefront of this. He would have had an absolute ridiculous day if, I think it was like a 73-yard run, didn't get called back from a penalty due to our newest guard, which I think he played guard and not center, even though he's listed on the depth chart as a center, and Fornadale, our UFL pickup. He had a holding call against him, so it came back. But Donovan Edwards not only looked extremely elusive, he looked hard to bring down. The contact balance was elite. He was strong in the receiving game, and he showed the home run threat ability. So everything that you could want, and I'm not hyping him up as an RB1, but when you just look at the traits and what someone would define as the characteristics they love, he did everything possible. If you didn't have a Breece Hall, a Isaiah Davis, a Braylon Allen on your roster, you're looking at Donovan Edwards and you're probably hyping him up after this game as someone that should be seeing significant snaps. So we'll see if we keep 4 running backs on the roster, but if so, he went out there and balled out as best as possible. I feel like I even recalled in like the third quarter seeing him come out there and pick up some guys in pass block sets. So absolutely thrilled with him. He looks like a flashback to the breakout year that he had with Michigan, and not necessarily the guy in his last year where it felt like he was really sapped of a lot of energy, a lot of juice, a lot of that explosiveness. But love the creativity and everything else that ultimately ended up showing for him, and I'm hoping we see these type of performances from him continue. Also, can't be spoken about enough that we're talking about him playing behind again. A lot of guys that we just brought in when it comes to like the Fornadales and the backup centers and, Max Mitchell's being out there, guys that really just didn't perform overall well across the board, and he was able to make some magic happen. Braylon Allen, he ran particularly hard, 8 rushes, 33 yards, but it seemed like every time he was touching the ball, he was battering through 2 or 3 guys to pick up 3 or 4 yards, and then we started to see those become bigger and bigger as guys, felt the pain of having to try to tackle him. And then I wanted to give a shout out to Isaiah Davis because I saw this the moment it was highlighted during the game, but then I love seeing all the clips come out afterwards. On Justin Fields' touchdown run, he pulled the DK Metcalf off, which was he was streaking down the field, seeing his quarterback was coming now or someone was running behind him, and he ended up faking the catch to try to draw his defender's attention so they couldn't come up to make a play. And I think it was just the best demonstration of teamwork and ultimately understanding the role and being able to react to what was going on, which wasn't a RPO type run or anything like that, but a scramble based on what the defense was showing. So still love that he's showing just, the veteran experience and savvy of a guy that's been in the league for 6 or 7 years now. Defensively, want to chat about these guys too. Sauce Gardner was still sticky, still looked like the elite lockdown guy, and for as much hype as he's been getting all training camp, still looked like someone who's going to be able to go out there and shut stuff down. So he did draw the Packers' #1 wide receiver, most recent first round draft pick as well, and he did allow 1 catch, also drew a penalty, but for the most part, you have the feeling that over the course of that game, he wasn't going to be targeted but maybe 1 or 2 more times, and most likely he was going to end up winning those matchups. So love it. Quantez Stiggers, my guy. I absolutely love the fact that he's been buried down the depth chart on this particular training camp with just the number of DBs we've been bringing in and the lack of noise really around him. But he had a strong week of practice, really tore it up this game, right? On special teams, which is probably going to be the way he needed to make this roster anyways. Went out there, and I'm almost positive he made every first half tackle on special teams for kickoff or punt return, whichever units he was covering at that time. And he was able to go out there and really just demonstrate the ball of energy that he is. But again, being able to take advantage of the scenarios that he's presented with. And he feels like a guy that brings that size, speed element, 6 foot-ish, but can run really well. And while he's still getting acclimated to NFL, what the rules are, the field dimensions and all that different kind of stuff, the techniques. He's a guy that's been under Sauce Gardner's wing, which we can't forget about, where he's always been in his ear, chasing behind him and trying to pick up what it is that he's seeing and really level up his NFL knowledge. And I think you got to see it here. Really, the only drawback for his performance that game was after immediately making some of these tackles, he's going out there and he's playing on defense. And I know he got a illegal contact penalty against him, which I think also resulted in a big play, but he did look a little bit gassed. So I'll be curious to see how Aaron Glenn and company tries to manage that with someone that's going out there and playing a big role on special teams, coverage units, with also having to go out there and play more snaps than you'd expect if he made the regular season roster for these preseason games. But looked really, really good. And then the trench play. Jay Tufele, absolute monster performance, 1.5 sacks. The thing that everybody needs to continue to talk about was the insane stunt play that he had where he was beating, I think it was a guard or a tackle, kind of looked like an edge defender, was able to go out there, hit him with a swing move, run the arc, and was able to go out there and pick himself up a play, right? A sack or tackle for loss, whatever it was. The guy moves insanely well for someone that's just above 300-ish pounds. And whether it was the fumble recovery touchdown where he also was in on the play with Leonard Taylor, who we're going to throw into the mix here, he looked like one of the most dominant guys on our defensive line, and someone that potentially, with the missing of Byron Coward and with Derek Nottie not looking so hot, he's a guy that could make some noise and end up stealing that spot away to pair up next to Quinnen Williams. So if it wasn't for the encroachment penalty to kick off things in the first series, this was a guy that essentially had a perfect, if not beyond perfect day. Very unexpected, but something that we are definitely loving and would expect to see more of if this is what we can get out of him. We talked about Leonard Taylor. I do want to highlight Jamin Davis, who was able to take advantage of plays with the absence of Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who's listed as the third linebacker next to Quincy and Jamian. McCrary had the idiotic unnecessary roughness penalty, hitting a guy that was already 2 or 3 steps out of the line of scrimmage, or out of bounds anyways. And so Jamin Davis was able to come in, make the plays. He looked like a guy who you could see the flashes of why he was a first-round pick. I just don't think the consistency is there, and sometimes it feels like his recognition for how the play is flowing wasn't there. But seemed like he erased a lot of those concerns over the course of this particular game. And so if Marcelino wants to continue to hold down the fort for that third linebacker position, he's going to make sure he can at least stay on the field in order to do so. And then one of the last guys I want to call out was Jamarcus Weston. This was a UDFA guy that he's essentially our what's the name is escaping me. We had the DB. It's right there. It's literally right there. Anyways, he's essentially our version of the DB that would never see defense, but ultimately was a pure special teamer. Jamarcus Weston, freaky athlete. And so when you're a player that those athletic traits don't necessarily translate to the offensive or defensive side of the ball, whether it's inconsistency, whether you just aren't capable of really making the play, whatever the case is, you can always find a way to excel on special teams if you're highly athletic. And so he was able to go out there and pick himself up fumble recovery as well. And I think Quantez Stiggers forced the fumble, if not someone else. But you seen him flying down there. He was also able to pick up a pair of tackles on special teams as well. A guy that could really continue to impress this staff and Chris Banjo specific. Now, can we find a way to stash him on this roster? Only playing special teams, that's a completely separate story, but still someone worth highlighting here. So with all of that said, let me know what you guys think, because I was thoroughly impressed really from top to bottom. It felt like there were 3 or 4 guys on either side of the ball all the way through to the end of the fourth quarter that you can look at and say, this guy either performed the way I expected to in a positive manner, or he outperformed the expectations. And this is a guy that I'm going to be keeping my eye on even more. So let me know who you guys have as some of your standouts, some of your guys that you have growing concerns about based on this preseason game. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.